Welcome to Biden Brief. The content of the briefing includes: U.S. strikes for African countries off preferential trade list. China's party Mouthpiece calls for stabilizing ties with U.S. Wind power is caught in a perfect storm. The catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. Divisions over AI bubble up ahead of UK summit. U.S. strikes for African countries off preferential trade list. Financial Times. The U.S. is set to remove preferential trading access under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, from Uganda, the Central African Republic, Gabon, and Niger due to human rights violations and failure to make democratic progress. President Joe Biden cited Uganda's anti-gay laws as a gross violation of human rights, while Niger and Gabon were deemed to have failed to make progress towards political pluralism and the rule of law following coups earlier this year. The loss of AGOA status for all four countries will take effect in January, while South Africa will maintain its benefits. China's party Mouthpiece calls for stabilizing ties with U.S. Bloomberg. China's state-run newspaper, People's Daily, has called for improved ties with the U.S. and for the two countries to be partners rather than adversaries. The commentary comes amidst a flurry of diplomatic activity between the two nations, raising expectations of a possible meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden. Although U.S. and Chinese officials have agreed in principle to a leaders' meeting in November, China has yet to confirm attendance. The commentary also warned that the road to a meeting between Xi and Biden would not be smooth, and highlighted ongoing tensions between the two countries over issues such as Taiwan and the South China Sea. Wind power is caught in a perfect storm. Bloomberg. The catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. Financial Times. The Financial Times has called for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, saying that Israel needs to allow more aid into Gaza and lift its siege. It stated that Israel has the right to defend its citizens, but its collective punishment of the 2.3 million people trapped in Gaza must stop. The article also called on Hamas to release all hostages, and for Israel's allies to pressure the Israeli government to protect civilians and respect the rules of war. Divisions over AI bubble up ahead of UK summit. Financial Times. U.S. President Joe Biden has issued an executive order demanding that companies disclose how they are ensuring the safety of their artificial intelligence (AI) tools. The order, which is the broadest step taken by the Biden administration to address AI threats, covers issues ranging from national security to competition and consumer privacy. The order comes ahead of an AI summit in the UK, where industry representatives and wider society have complained of being squeezed out in favor of big tech and politicians. The summit will include a keynote speech by U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. The debate around AI regulation has intensified in recent weeks, with the EU set to approve a law outlining tough measures by the end of the year. The UK has said it will not rush to regulate, but has established a new safety body to assess and test new technologies. The Financial Times has called for an international framework for AI regulation to avoid a further balkanization of rules and regulatory capture. In related news, most AI startups are overvalued and will fail to make any money, according to Vinod Khosla, an early backer of OpenAI. Khosla drew parallels between the hype around AI and last year's frenzy around cryptocurrency. Street medicine, no longer uncompensated, goes for more. Washington Post. Street medicine, the practice of caring for homeless people outdoors, is being recognized by Medicaid, the U.S. government program for low-income people. It is now possible to bill Medicaid for treating the homeless anywhere, rather than only at traditional settings such as hospitals, clinics, and offices. Advocates for the homeless and the people who care for them say their medical needs have long been overlooked by the conventional healthcare system and the institutions that pay for care. Street medicine started gaining traction about 25 years ago, and today there are more than 150 programs across the U.S. At least 50 are in California. Practitioners of street medicine are now lobbying for higher Medicaid payment rates for their services, which they say are far more labor-intensive and time-consuming than health care delivered at hospitals or clinics. Outgoing Interior official reflects on debate over Willow project. Washington Post. Tommy Beaudreau has stepped down as the Interior Department's number 2 official after announcing his departure earlier this month. Beaudreau had to navigate the demands of the fossil fuel industry and climate activists, sometimes angering both sides. He was the signature on the administration's approval of the Alaskan oil drilling project known as Willow, which many activists decried as a carbon bomb. He also helped broker a historic deal to protect the Colorado River's water supply amid a climate change-fueled megadrought. Beaudreau cited a desire to spend more time with his family as the reason for his departure. President Biden is expected to tap senior Interior official Laura Daniel Davis to replace Beaudreau on an acting basis. Interior spokeswoman Melissa Schwartz declined to confirm these reports by saying the department has no personnel announcements to make. NC Governor Cooper, Republicans' new map will be challenged. Washington Post. Republicans in North Carolina have finalized a new congressional map that is likely to see them win 10 or 11 of the state's 14 seats in the House of Representatives. Democrats are planning to challenge the map's adherence to the Voting Rights Act, which requires fair minority representation. The party has already challenged similar maps in Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. The Supreme Court has recently ruled that the act applies in Alabama, which could strengthen the Democrats' case in North Carolina. Republicans have drawn the maps to ensure they are upheld in court, but Democrats are vowing to fight them. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper said that moves to reduce early voting and to restrict abortion and school funding will persuade independent voters to support the Democrats. U.S. looks to allay European fears of a subsidy war. New York Times. The Biden administration is attempting to address European concerns over the U.S.'s new climate and tax law, amid fears that the policy amounts to a protectionist industrial policy that could harm European economies. Allies have complained that the legislation makes their economies less attractive to investment by virtue of the vast incentives given to the U.S. clean energy industry. Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo will tell a conference in Germany that the legislation does not represent a turn towards protectionism or a subsidy race to the bottom, and that the U.S. is keen to maintain a strong industrial base in Germany. With executive order, White House tries to balance AI's potential and peril. New York Times. The White House has issued a new executive order aimed at governing the development and use of artificial intelligence (AI). The order includes provisions to require companies developing large AI systems to notify the government and share the results of their safety testing before releasing their models to the public. It also instructs cloud providers that rent computers to AI developers to disclose information about their foreign customers and directs federal agencies to prevent AI algorithms from exacerbating discrimination. The order also includes measures to loosen immigration restrictions for workers with specialized AI expertise, and to streamline the visa process for such workers. The order strikes a balance between pragmatism and caution and represents the clearest guidelines for the development and use of AI in the foreseeable future. The move is part of a wider international trend towards regulating AI, with the EU's AI Act potentially becoming law next year, and the UK set to introduce new measures to rein in AI development. Blinken, Austin to press for Israel, Ukraine aid in Senate testimony. Washington Post. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will testify in the Senate on Tuesday in support of a $105 billion request to support Israel, Ukraine, and other security priorities. The funding request has bipartisan support, but some Republicans are skeptical about providing aid to Ukraine. The hearing will provide insight into whether President Biden will be able to win congressional support for his strategy on Ukraine. The request includes $61 billion for Ukraine, a significant amount that Biden hopes will last until the 2024 elections. The funding request also includes $14 billion for Israel, more than 4 times the amount sent last year. The U.S. hopes to deter regional conflict in the Middle East by providing sufficient aid to Israel. Democrats hope to pass security assistance quickly to avoid a funding shortfall for Ukraine. Why Japan letting yen weaken risks stirring up global hornets' best. South China Morning Post. The Japanese yen's recent decline against the US dollar raises concerns about a potential currency war in Asia. Historically, Japan has favored a weak yen to boost exports and corporate profits, while financiers often think the exchange rate has fallen too far. However, this time the stakes are higher, as the yen hits 33-year lows. The outcome of this stalemate between yen bulls and Tokyo bureaucrats could have far-reaching implications for economies from Beijing to Washington. Japan must be cautious not to ignite a currency war that could lead to a chaotic race to the bottom for Asian currencies. World leaders are gathering at the UK's AI summit. Doom is on the agenda. Washington Post. The upcoming Global Artificial Intelligence Summit, hosted by British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, has highlighted diverging priorities between the UK and the US. While Sunak has focused on the doomsday scenarios of AI, warning of extreme possibilities, the White House has concentrated effort on tangible problems, releasing an executive order aimed at preventing AI from exacerbating bias, displacing workers and undermining national security. The UK has taken a light-touch approach to regulation, and Sunak has sought to position the country as the world's third AI power. However, his warnings and focus on potential risks are seen by some as a distraction from more pressing issues and a quest for economic gain. The UK is attempting to recover clout post-Brexit and establish itself as a competitive AI development hub, with an AI market valued at over $21 billion. The summit will be held at Bletchley Park, the former home of World War II codebreakers, and will be attended by global leaders, technology executives and leading AI scientists. As Israel pummels Gaza, the crisis in the West Bank comes into focus. Washington Post. The current situation in the West Bank is one of increasing violence and tension. A surge in violence involving Palestinians and Israeli settlers has seen attacks by armed settlers on Palestinian villages, property and crops escalate. Since the war in Gaza began, 7 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli settlers, while more than 100 Palestinians in the West Bank have been killed by Israeli forces. Hundreds of Palestinians have been driven from their homes by settlers who appear to be acting with a degree of impunity. It is feared that this could be a prelude to a wider campaign of violence and expulsion. The Israeli government is supportive of these attacks and does nothing to stop them. The government ministers are backing the violence and the military is present or even participates in the violence. The increasing clout of extremist politicians who champion the expansion of settlements in the West Bank and the annexation of some of its land, as well as Israeli attitudes growing more hawkish, have hung over a year of spiraling violence in the West Bank. The Biden administration has urged Israel to rein in its extremist settlers. U.S. to send strongest ever delegation to China Import Expo amid improving ties. South China Morning Post. The United States is reportedly set to send its strongest ever delegation to the China International Import Expo, CIIE, next week. The delegation will include high-level officials from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the bipartisan advocacy group U.S. Heartland China Association. This marks a significant shift in U.S. participation in the expo, which has previously been attended by individual firms and trade organizations. The move comes amid improving relations between Beijing and Washington. The USDA will also lead a group of 17 exhibitors at the expo, showcasing agricultural produce and technology from U.S. states. Differing U.S. and Chinese objectives will limit Xi-Biden meeting outcomes. South China Morning Post. China and the U.S. both seek to stabilize their relationship, but each brings a different lens to an expected meeting between Presidents Joe Biden and Xi Jinping in November, according to Australia's envoy to the U.S. Ambassador Kevin Rudd told a panel hosted by the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington on Monday the difference in expectations would lead to, at best, modest outcomes. China's interest was in more trade, more investment, or access to capital markets, to relieve its internal economic tension, while the U.S. was seeking to de-risk economically from China and reduce the risk of conflict through resumed military dialogue. What does UN vote on Israel-Gaza ceasefire say about U.S. Asia-Pacific influence? South China Morning Post. A United Nations resolution on the Israel-Gaza war has revealed contrasting patterns of voting among the United States' Asia-Pacific partners. The resolution, which calls for an immediate humanitarian truce leading to a cessation of hostilities, was adopted by the UN General Assembly on Friday. Among the countries that voted against a ceasefire were the US, Israel, Fiji, Tonga, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, and Papua New Guinea. Some analysts believe that these countries are deliberately distancing themselves from the US, while others have suggested that their close alignment with the US is due to the American aid they receive. Several US allies in the region, including Australia, India, Japan, and the Philippines, abstained from the vote, citing the resolution's failure to condemn Hamas for its October 7 attack that led to the deaths of more than 1,400 people in Israel. The non-binding resolution serves as a barometer of global opinion, and the US government's stance on a ceasefire has hurt its credibility and moral standing. Why Netanyahu must go. Foreign Affairs. Following the brutal attack by Hamas terrorists on October 7, in which over 1,400 people were killed and more than 220 taken as hostages, it has become clear that Hamas cannot be allowed to remain in charge of Gaza. Defeating Hamas is not only in Israel's interest, but also in the interest of the free world. The military campaign against Hamas must succeed, but it is equally important to establish political objectives for the aftermath. Israel must create a new political horizon for the region and make progress towards a two-state solution for Israelis and Palestinians in order to secure its future as a democratic nation-state. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has proven unfit to lead any part of this process. He has worked to strengthen Hamas's position in Gaza and prevent political unity among Palestinians. His focus has been on expanding Jewish settlements in the West Bank and destroying the possibility of a two-state solution. Netanyahu must resign immediately in order for Israel to rebound from the destruction he has caused. It is crucial that Israel offers the Palestinians a vision for peace that affords them national dignity. The destruction of Hamas's armed forces will create a political vacuum in Gaza, and Israel must help design a process in which an international force, coordinated by Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and the United States, takes responsibility for a transitional period. This transition could pave the way for negotiations on a two-state plan, subject to modifications, that would enable Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace and secure their prosperity. Court temporarily bars federal officials from removing Texas border wire. Washington Post. A federal judge has barred the Biden administration from cutting or removing razor wire placed along the border by Texas officials, ruling that the barriers limit illegal crossings and impose costs on the state. The temporary restraining order allows federal officials to cut the wire to provide emergency medical aid, but scheduled a hearing for November 7 to consider Texas' request for a longer-term ruling against the Biden administration. Texas Governor Greg Abbott and the Biden administration have been engaged in a number of legal battles over border security. Will she or won't she? Why Beijing has held off confirming APEC attendance. South China Morning Post. Chinese President Xi Jinping's attendance at the APEC forum in San Francisco, where he is expected to meet U.S. President Joe Biden, has not yet been confirmed. This delay reflects a lack of trust between the two nations, China's political culture, concern over potential embarrassment, and an attempt to extract concessions from the U.S., according to analysts. China is reportedly seeking a guarantee from the U.S. that no new sanctions or other embarrassing developments will be announced during Xi's visit. In 2017, Xi was unsettled when then-President Donald Trump launched a missile strike on Syria during their meeting at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. The White House is unlikely to make a no-news promise, analysts said, as this could be seen as weakness towards China in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. Beijing also wants to keep its options open to withdraw from the meeting if necessary, and improve its bargaining position in negotiations over trade sanctions. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Six from the 6 Degrees World, bringing you the latest news from around the globe. Today, we covered a range of topics, from the U.S. removing preferential trade access from 4 African countries to the upcoming AI summit in the UK. We also discussed the situation in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as the controversy surrounding the Japanese yen's decline. Now, let's dive deeper into these stories. Starting with the U.S. removing preferential trade access from Uganda, the Central African Republic, Gabon, and Niger, it's a significant move that reflects the Biden administration's commitment to human rights and democratic progress. While it's important to hold countries accountable for their actions, it's also crucial to consider the potential impact on the people of these nations. We must find a balance between promoting human rights and supporting economic development. Moving on to the China-US relationship, the recent commentary in China's state-run newspaper, calling for improved ties with the U.S., is a positive development. It shows that both countries recognize the importance of working together and finding common ground. However, as the commentary highlighted, there are still significant challenges ahead, particularly regarding issues such as Taiwan and the South China Sea. It will be interesting to see how the upcoming meeting between President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden unfolds, and whether it leads to any tangible progress. Shifting gears to the wind power industry, it's clear that the sector is facing significant challenges. Falling profitability, rising costs, and a lack of government support have all contributed to the current situation. To ensure the success of the wind energy sector, governments need to simplify processes for developers and create a conducive environment for investment. It's crucial to have a vibrant pipeline of projects to boost profitability and drive sustainable growth. Now, let's turn our attention to the situation in Gaza. The Financial Times has called for a humanitarian ceasefire and highlighted the need for Israel to allow more aid into the region. While Israel has the right to defend its citizens, it's essential to find a balanced approach that respects the human rights of the people in Gaza. Similarly, Hamas needs to release all hostages and work towards a peaceful resolution. The international community and Israel's allies have a role to play in pressuring the Israeli government to protect civilians and adhere to the rules of war. Moving on to the AI summit in the UK, the debate around AI regulation has intensified in recent weeks. The US has issued an executive order demanding transparency from companies developing AI tools, while the EU is set to approve a law outlining tough measures. It's clear that there is a need for an international framework to avoid a fragmented and inconsistent approach to AI regulation. As we navigate the challenges and opportunities presented by AI, it's crucial to strike a balance between innovation and ensuring the safety and ethical use of AI technologies. In other news, street medicine in the US is gaining recognition, with Medicaid now allowing billing for treating the homeless anywhere, not just in traditional settings. This is a positive step towards addressing the medical needs of the homeless population and ensuring that they receive the care they require. However, there is still a need for higher Medicaid payment rates to reflect the labor-intensive and time-consuming nature of street medicine. Lastly, we discussed the political landscape in North Carolina, where Republicans have finalized a new congressional map that is likely to favor them in the House of Representatives. Democrats are planning to challenge the map's adherence to the Voting Rights Act, highlighting the ongoing debate around fair representation and voting rights. It's important to ensure that all voices are heard, and that the electoral process is fair and transparent. That's all for today's news. Now, I'd like to hear from you, our viewers. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any questions or comments? Please feel free to join the discussion and share your opinions. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.